It's a parochialism, we'd call it.
So tell me about your relationship to Leeuwin. How are you connected?
Right. I was born here, but I went away to sea when I was 17 as an apprentice with BHP and their fleet of ships. I had several years at sea, working my way up through the various examinations. Along the way, whilst living in Melbourne, became involved with a square rigger, the Golden Plover, that was being refitted, and I helped her to stability calculations and learnt a lot about the rigging. And one of the people who was involved was a master on the Pamir. He's an old Finn, and I learnt a lot about square rig sailing from him. So from there, another brigantine, as it was, being restored, built in 1911 of iron in Germany. A group of owners who'd sailed on the New Endeavour, a barkentine that came out to Australia from the Baltic, wanted to relive or continue that sort of, the availability of that sort of experience to people, to come and live and work and voyage on a square rigger. The dream of so many people, and this was one way of getting people to experience it. About 3 months before it was ready to sail, they were looking for a master, and my name came up. Monica, my wife, and I took about 5 minutes to decide, and we said yes, provided I would come for free, provided Monica and our 2 sons, who were aged 8 and 9 at the time, could come for free as well. And that worked both ways. It was a good deal. It transformed my life. I had a very high-pressure job in Melbourne with BHP ashore, but we'd done our tree change to Yarra Glen, so it was an hour and a half each way each day to the office. The boys were asleep when I left and asleep when I got home. I had to be away at weekends, and one day I realised my younger son was terrified of me. No job's worth that, so things coincided, meant to be, if you like. So we had 2 years there. We finished off the refitting, rebuild of it, and sailed it via every palm tree between Faversham, the mouth of the Thames, through the Panama Canal, through Galapagos, Easter Island, Pitcairn Island, the remote Austral Islands, then up through Tahiti and the Cook Islands and Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, back to Sydney, and then my possible relief was delayed, so we stayed on and took it up to Singapore and left there in January in time to get the boys back to school. I repeated that a couple of years later. The boys were 13 and 16 the second time. We rejoined it in England, sailed it out a similar path for about 18 months back to Sydney, where we were living at that time. So that made me eligible, if you liked. I had my square rigging endorsement on my master's qualifications, and at some stage, about, I'm trying to think, three or 4 years after we returned, I'd taken up a job teaching at the Navigation College in Melbourne, and they needed a master for Leeuwin, so off I came.
What year was that?
That's 1986. I came over July the 1st, 1986. The ship was launched on the 2nd of August and commissioned on the 15th of September, in time for the America's Cup and a charter with Leeuwin Estate. The name of Leeuwin fits in with the Dutch ship Leeuwin of 1627 and Cape Leeuwin, after which it's named, which it's named after, and the Leeuwin Estate vineyard. And that gave us time to sort out a lot of the shortcomings as a result of the build, disjointed as it had been, to tune the rigging and to train up a crew. I stayed on it for 2 years. I had 4 weeks off in total in that time. But we, after the America's Cup, we had a refit and got into sail training proper. Interrupted by the bicentennial event, which we were funded to go to by the Tall Ships Authority, the Australian Broad Bicentennial Authority. So that's a short answer by my standards of how we got there.
So when you first saw the boat?
When I first saw it, I saw it on...
What was the immediate impression?
Oh, it was, at that stage it had no masts. They were lifted on board that coming week. A good hull, slightly more yacht-like under the water than conventional square riggers. Len Randall, the naval architect's done a brilliant job on it. It was good. I managed to amend the rigging to my way for a few things, and I suggested a couple of extra bunks in cabins so that we end up with 40 trainees instead of 30 there. No, I was very comfortable with it. And once I saw the rigging, that was the main thing. I was very comfortable indeed. The standard of the rig is outstanding. It was until it met its ultimate test and failed.
So, I mean, how many years were you involved?
Oh, just the two.
Just the two.
But I did that. It was very wearying, very tiring. But it was about time we hadn't committed to return to Western Australia permanently. I wanted my wife to see it because she's from Germany. We married in Germany. She was very happy and comfortable in Whyalla, Melbourne, Sydney, but she wasn't sure of Fremantle where the rest of my family was. And so we needed 2 years for her to decide, yes, we would stay here. And so I got a job at the Navigation College lecturing again.
So during that 2 years, there must have been a lot of adventures. There must have been a lot of happenings. What are the memorable moments from that time?
The America's Cup was quite an exciting time. Fremantle's never been quite as it was before since then. The whole atmosphere of this place, which has made it an even more vibrant place to live. The bringing into life a ship which did have a lot of hiccups. The ship was fitted out, it was built here locally, but it was fitted out by subcontractors, and we had things malfunctioning. So in a way, our time with the America's Cup was a great benefit and able to rectify a lot of those problems. The first training voyage was in May 1987, and we had space for 6 journalists during the trip for obvious reasons. We had 44 trainees, a good mix, and we went from here to Bunbury. I had to bypass Augusta that way. We called in on our way back to Albany, and from Albany we sailed a bit early because there was a fairly strong gale, and we were dragging anchors in the outer harbour. I always feel safer in heavy weather at sea than I do in port. And we sailed, and that became a very severe storm, which we had for about 42 hours. We shortened right down to sail. We hove to effectively. And that was quite an experience. The emergency fire pump and the emergency batteries turned upside down on deck, and one of the large inflatable life rafts broke free and jammed. We had to get those all secured. The waves were washing right across the deck of the ship. And I'd locked down all openings except the aftermost one into the charge room because of the water on deck. And we had the lifelines up and down. The crew generally responded well. I have seen, it's one of the first times I've seen someone white with terror. He was a 23-year-old lad from just inland from Perth. And he was cold, he was on deck, but he wouldn't let go of the rigging. He didn't want to go below. I said, go on, pop down, get yourself a pullover or something and warm up. He said, but will it be safe? And I said, of course it's safe. Anyway, he took him and he went down, and about 5 or 10 minutes later, he appeared with a thumbs up. The kids actually responded well. Panic is quite easy to start and very difficult to stop, and there was no suggestion that was about to happen.
I could have let panic fall.
Yeah, well, you would have stayed below, out of sight.
What were the sort of typical reactions of people on first voyages?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a typical. They come away, you find some are brash, you find some are the extroverted, they're prepared, ready for anything. You find the quieter, or some who have had no experience of their physical ability, which happens so much more now. Kids have so much more homework. I mean, I left school at 14, but that's the first year I had homework. It was a composition every weekend, which my mother wrote and I copied. But nowadays, kids are so busy with homework, and there's no chores around the house for them. They may laughingly stack the dishwasher or unload it, but we had firewood to chop for the fire, the copper, the bath heater, the stove. We had to shop daily because there was no supermarkets, we had no fridge, and this is in suburban South Perth. And you were involved in doing things. When the power blew the fuses, where you'd go and change those, and you painted corrugated iron roofs, and the last thing that happens now. So unwittingly, we were comfortable being directed to do things. I'll take one case, a 17-year-old girl, because I had the 4 watches, 3 navigational and 1 doing all the work down below, cleaning the accommodation, helping the chef, setting tables, that sort of thing, and rotated daily. But on one case, the chef turned to a girl and said, "Oh, Louise, would you toss that salad for me, please?" And he went back, and then he noticed the silence in turn, tears streaming down the cheek. He said, "What's the matter, Lou?" He said, "I've never cooked before." So you had that sort of...
Threatening to all on board.
No, quite a few of those on board were like that. They're hesitant.
That does bring up sort of the idea of education. What did you perceive or note of the real learnings that came out of the voyage, for the people who sailed with you?
I tried not to. I tried not to have them thinking about that during the voyage. I wasn't one to say, "Now look, you write down what you think you're going to happen and experience, and we'll send that letter to you in 6 weeks' time," or something. Or, now, how did you feel about that, kids, when you did? I didn't. I worked on the principle of getting them very, very tired every day so that they slept well, hopefully. It was a physical work in the sense of the ship is entirely hydraulic. Apart from the electric windlasses, the ship has no mechanical or electrical aids to easing the physical burden of hoisting very heavy sails on very heavy timber yards. So it requires coordinated effort to translate, say, 10 people hauling on one rope to hoist it effectively. And they learn that quickly. They learn very quickly that they need to coordinate all their pulling at the same time, and to depend on others to stop her off while they shift their hand grips and things like this. They wanted to learn in almost all cases. Some were more readily, and there were quite often surprises. I had them holystoning the deck, not because I needed the decks that clean, but it was a good way of getting them down on hands and knees and working along those lines. It wasn't a matter of useless work. I wanted to get them doing stuff they've never done before. I wanted to, I suppose, emphasize the strangeness of their situation. It's away from home, and there are jobs which get done because either traditionally brass polishing, or because essential, hauling on ropes and steering and keeping a lookout at night. For relief, in the afternoon we had Leeuwin sports, which is again, the 4 watches were set against each other, competing. We'd line them up. Sometimes it'd be tug of war. Sometimes it'd be, I'd call the name of a particular rope. On board there's 120 odd, and the first one to put their hand on that belaying pin, got the point for their watch. The prize every time was 1 sliver of Kit Kat for the whole watch, but it was to try and give light-hearted relief to them, yet still physical and still requiring team effort.
At the end of a voyage, do you need to express things they learned? Did they say, "Oh my God, I discovered this"?
Well, some did. I came in from one voyage, and the kids went ashore, and a few days later I left on the next. And as I did, the radio telephone went, as it was then, and I answered it, and one said, "Oh, it's Sally Parker here, Skipper." She said, "You had my daughter Sophie on last week." I said, "Oh, yes." He said, "I don't know what you did to her, but you've got my son Josh this time. Please do the same thing for him." He said, "Sally talks to me freely. I've seen her whole bedroom carpet for the first time in years. She picks up a tea towel without being asked. I've never seen such a difference in a kid." We see a percentage of those kids coming back, if you like, graduates, to be watch leaders, the next step up, because each watch had an ex-trainee as a watch leader. They've been trained up, and they have to be 18, of course, but and they're the ones that do the hard work. They're the ones that the watch identify with. They feel like the leader of the teams, individuals, but it's surprising how the end result was much the same with each of them. I never set out, it's happened since I left, that there's this, on the last sailing day of the voyage, they hand the ship over to the trainees, who the night before have after dinner, have got together and they have elected a captain for the day, a mate for the day, a bosun for the day. I don't particularly like that idea, because I didn't set out to reward a particular leader. I wasn't after leadership skills per se. I wanted the kids to experience something they'd never done before, but something which would give them a confidence in their own ability to do unknown tasks in the future, because life is full of unknown tasks. And that's all it was. There's leadership schools at Outward Bound, and various schools run them, the private schools particularly run their own programs, but this was just to give young people a chance to come away, mix with others of their own age group, from a variety of backgrounds and to learn something about other people from areas and fields that they may never meet again, but just to learn to work with them and stretch themselves.
So for someone like me, I come from the East, I don't know anything about the Leeuwin. How would you tell me about that? How would you describe what the Leeuwin is? First question. The second bit is, what's its benefit? What do you see as its benefit?
The Leeuwin was designed along the lines of the original, as we see it, English Sail Training Association. There is now, of course, an International Sail Training Association. The English, well, when I was over there, they had some smaller ones, but they had the Winston Churchill, the Stavros and the Iakos, the Malcolm Miller, about the same size as Leeuwin. And they would take the kids out and in similar things. It was a matter of putting them in an uncomfortable, not necessarily deliberately uncomfortable, but an unfamiliar environment where they all pretty well start from the same. Even if you sail a yacht as a VJ or wouldn't know what they are now, but it doesn't help you much when it comes to sailing a square rigger, which is steer by wheel and a compass rather than hand on tiller. And so it's to put them all together in that environment and to teach them to cope, or to guide them to cope rather than to teach them. We taught them how to haul together. We taught them which ropes were where, and it was surprising how rapidly they learnt where the lines were and what they did. As someone said, trying to get them to decline a couple of French verbs would an incredible task compared with what they achieved in a day or two on the Leeuwin. They'd soon pick up the rudiments. They'd get tired. Some of them would get seasick. I never saw anyone go beyond the fourth day, and that was rare. My attitude was, once we got them on board and issued them with their wet weather gear and their life jackets and their smock, as we used to call it, their working jacket, anonymity, I'd leave the berth, because too often parents are there waving and it interfered with the kids blending. The kids would always be conscious of their parents there. So I'd go out and anchor, do all the safety checks, the man overboard drills, the lifeboat drills, all that sort of thing. And then we'd sail. Usually sail by about 4 or 5 o'clock at night, under sufficiently easy sail that I wouldn't have to send anyone aloft at night, hopefully. And out. Get the seasickness started, if you like. Get them all into that world of unfamiliarity fairly quickly. And the process began. They start with their night watches. They'd start with learning to steer and keeping lookout. Handling ropes as needed, if we needed to trim the sails at all. But more than anything, starting to get away from the familiar environment. And then over the course of 10 days, we'd call into an intermediate port, usually about the 6th or 7th day. I tried not to stay in at night, but if we did, they either didn't go ashore at all, or they went ashore to something guided, like a netball court or something like that. It was still a matter of keeping them together in an environment. And that was it. We worked them. They got very familiar with working the ship. By the time we pulled into that intermediate port, they could handle the sails. And we would take out people for a half-day sail. The people being grandparents and parents of potential other sailors in the country ports. We'd sail within the West Australian ports.
How did you feel a few months back when the incident happened?
I was about the first one down there. I'd just come out of the swimming pool. Something like that's a bit of a shock. You could still, when I arrived, the ship was still, had its anchor down and off in the distance and holding off, and the tugs were still around. Well, walking back with there's a change of CEOs occurring. That one was finishing that night, the other was starting the next morning. They were both there, and I said, well, we've had 38 years of very fortunate times. We're getting a new rig at the expense of someone else. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but two people were shocked. They were on board and galloped up. They aloft. One was slightly injured in the arm. Both were quite shocked, but they're recovering from that. I can't say they'll ever forget it, but we're very, very fortunate indeed in that situation. The rigging can be replaced.
Yeah, I think there's been discussion about what improvements might be.
Oh, they're taking the opportunity, and it'd be silly not to look at. We built it with steel masts and laminated timber yards, which was conventional. It wasn't. Other sailing ships, a little bit smaller, had extruded aluminium masts and yards. Some had timber.
How do you feel about the sort of change in materials?
Nothing. I think you can get tied up with, that's the way it's always been. It's not so. I want to keep the heavy rig. I want to keep the hydraulic. That is the whole teaching process of the whole ship, unwittingly, unknowingly to the kids. That's what brings them into their working teams. So I wouldn't like to see any aids to hosting.
Is there anything that symbolises the Leeuwin? I mean, something that you...
It's the atmosphere. We are parochial in this state. You might have noticed. And we are, as a state, we've become very possessive of the Leeuwin. For a while, and exacerbated by COVID, the ship did not go out of Fremantle. It went from Fremantle back to Fremantle. Sometimes it would call in Busselton or Bunbury, but the whole purpose of it, and we started off sailing from Esperance, all ports through up to Wyndham. We went once, I think, but even to Darwin, but certainly to Derby and Broome and Port Hedland and Point Sampson. It was seen by the whole state, and some of the strongest supporters come from those country towns, because we have Adventure World here, we have cinemas en masse, we have all sorts of activities which kids in country towns don't have to the same extent. And this was seen by parents anyway as a good experience for kids, and they were notably stronger supporters.
So to the supporters and to the unknown, what's the one thing you would want them to know or understand about the Leeuwin? In a sense,
it works. It's right from the beginning. It has changed the lives of many people by getting them out of a shell which might have persisted for many years more. It's got them out. They've learnt. On watch one night, I was eavesdropping, and in fact at the meal, and a 23-year-old kid from Kalgoorlie, pretty tough life. He'd scrimped and saved and got himself a beat-up old Holden, which was the love of his life, and he's talking about this, and he became conscious and said, Chloe, do you drive? And the 17-year-old from Pittmont Grove said, yes, I do. He said, have you got a car? I said, yes, Daddy bought me a Mercedes for my birthday. Those two kids became very good friends. Each was learning something of a lifestyle totally different from their own, with different past experiences and different future hopes. So they developed, amongst other things, just an understanding Yeah, I would have hated to have 40 17-year-old male motor mechanic apprentices, or 40 23-year-old female bank tellers. Yeah, it's the mix of world, till then, life experiences, lifetime dreams, together with the socio-economic background. That's part of it. And that's why when we first started, we included the cost of transport from home to where the Leeuwin was, and from where the Leeuwin left them to back to home by the bus. Might take them 18 hours or 24 hours sometimes from Esperance to Port Hedland, but that was included in everybody's fare was standard. No one paid more or less, and that guaranteed this mix of experiences, and to me that was also a big part of it.
So in a lot of ways it's not about what the Leeuwin is, but what the Leeuwin does.
Yes, what the Leeuwin enables for the kids to experience, both physical and in being exposed to others' experiences.
I think it's terrific. I think we're done.
Okay.
We've got a lot here.
Okay.
Highly articulate here.
I've had years of practice.
Oh, okay. You can get out there and talk to yourself on the sea.
Oh no, I've always found someone to talk to.
I really appreciate your time.
No, good Ken. I'm rather fond of Leeuwin, and I'd do anything to.
And hardly anyone of the previous board or governors knew who Malcolm Hay was. And Malcolm, his legacy will live forever with his ship. But
So who was Malcolm?
Malcolm was the instigator of building the ship for the sake of giving young people a tool to learn leadership, learn dealing with problems. The Leeuwin was especially set up for that mainly. It did corporate jobs as well, especially during the America's Cup and charters.
But who was Malcolm?
Malcolm was an orthopaedic surgeon and a real statesman of WA, and he was he was very inspirational with the development of kids and just young people generally. The ship was still open to any demographic. When I was a volunteer crew on that ship in the 80s, 90s, we had all sorts of demographic on board, fellas to my age now and older, and right down to kids, teenagers. Now it's more emphasised on younger kids. It's also emphasised on disabled, and it was a perfect tool. Even though it's a sailing ship, it was a perfect tool for making memories and giving kids the experience and adults where they can, wherever there's a problem, they can't walk away from it. They have to deal with it. It could be something mechanical on the ship, it could be something to do with a torn sail, it could be something to do with fellow crew members. At the end of the day, like on land, unlike on land, they can't walk away, they deal with it. And that in itself is where it was fantastic. And when I was crewing on that ship as a watch leader, I saw many different positive things come up. And there were kids who had issues, and to this day I know they'd be around now, who that voyage changed them around. Not a problem at all. They were 10-day voyages. If you added on the arrival and the departure, it's probably more like 11 days. And the ship was divided up into 4 watches, and with that we had volunteer crew, and right up to the captain and the first mate, the bosun and engineer and cooks, and we all became a very united team by the time that voyage was over. so much so it was emotional when everyone would depart their own ways.
I can imagine. You're saying it was made from memories.
Yeah.
What are some of the really strong memories you have from that?
I think various kids had issues with height, going aloft. There were quite overpowering characters in some watches, and all that got all levelled out. There was many fun times where the bosun in particular would, along with the support of the captain and the first mate, they would have games and competitions on the ship, and anyone who was sort of mainly a watch leader and make a mistake would have to wear what they call the busted block, and it was a block as a pulley, right? We know what a block is, a pulley block, and it was broken, and we'd have to wear that block around our neck for 24 hours, depending how bad the punishment was. Might have been 2 hours, might be 2 days. And that doesn't exist anymore. You've sailed on the ship, Kate? Yeah. No one ever fell off the yards or anything apart from almost a deliberate accident, which would happen anyway. And as long as 3 points of your body was on the rigging, you would be virtually impossible to come off, even in any weather. We clipped on with a harness around our waists. Now I haven't actually experienced the latest harness, but it's all over body, and it's you go up on there's ratchets going all the way up on the following up the masts and up onto the yards and everything like that. I haven't seen that. I don't know where to start with those things. I sailed with thousands of others back in the day with it was just a belt with a dog clip. And
The whole thing sounds frightening to me.
yeah.
I was talking earlier about the power of the sea and
Yeah.
intimidating. That is for me.
Yeah.
And you just see the force of water.
Yeah. It really, yeah. And there was occasions where the very first voyage I was on, we had a captain on board who was an oil tanker captain, and he liked a lot of water underneath us, and so much water. We never saw a sight of land for 90% of that voyage. We went straight out to sea, and he was a brilliant captain. This guy, he was a Scotsman, and he ruled the ship very fairly. But boy, you don't step out of line. And in a way, he was a breath of fresh air, and on the other hand, he was intimidation. But boy, he stuck in my memory, and no doubt quite a few others. Our dear Captain Alan Willing.
I think, things come across. It's obviously incredible for team building and for working with others.
Yeah, that is the exact reason that ship was put on the water, was for team building and bringing kids out of their shell and making them work together and giving them initiative and leadership. And with the disabled, that happened. And various schools sent their kids on the ship. There were cultural voyages, for just shorter sails. There were the day sails, and to this day, I don't know where to start with memories. They're everywhere, really.
So how did you feel the other couple of months back with the accident?
Initially, I thought, oh yeah, someone's pulled a joke, and I thought I got that message about 5:30 in the morning, and with a camera shot on the phone, and I thought this is impossible. And then I realised it wasn't happening. It was happening, and I think, well, it's a no-brainer. The ship was tied up, and a container ship, which was under command of the pilots and the tugs, ran the ship, so we'll just get everything all fixed up because of that. No doubt there will be some other implications, but It was horrifying, really, but just think of the glass half full instead of half empty. Not a soul was hurt. There was two people on board below deck. Had anyone been on top of the deck, above deck, then no one on deck would have had a very slim chance of missing the carnage that was created by that ship.
You're right with that coming at you.
Yeah.
On deck.
Yeah, and everything, once one thing got pulled apart, it pulled everything else down as well. My goodness, yeah. So I instantly thought the ship would have been taking water because of the infrastructure down below would have been affected. Apparently it wasn't, and there's future for the ship still, so that's good. And I'm sure I know very little about what Port Authority, the shipping line, and what's going on with the insurances and stuff like that, but I'm confident the ship will be sailing again soon. Before too long anyway.
I mean, what comes across to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what comes across to me is that it's not so much about the ship, it's about what the ship does and what the ship produces.
Yeah, that's right.
In a sense, the vehicle for getting other things to happen.
Yep, absolutely. Look, the ship is the Wholesale Training Association, or the ship itself with the association, the volunteer crew and everything, the volunteer crew being the absolute backbone of the whole infrastructure. The board is just hopefully a board you'd expect would be full of experienced people. The governors ought to have had some sort of background on the ship as well. If it wasn't for the volunteers of the organisation, there'd be no ship. So with that, with the CEO and cross with the volunteers, organise these voyages, and the voyages have in mind of a goal with children or teenagers of being the absolute tool, for no better word, to make sure that they won't come off that ship without having it etched in their memory. And there's good parts of it. Even my own kid's been on it, and he's only been on it once, but he still implements today what things are. And he's now 18. But now the voyages are shorter, if there's going to be a new structure in that, maybe the voyages could be considered turning back into 10-day voyages again when the ship's back on the water. So Malcolm Hayes' dream was absolutely a reality, and I guess if he saw what happened to the ship, he'd be spinning in his grave, I dare say. There were previous issues, of course, before that ship came to, that accident a few months ago. That was more administrative, and Malcolm would have been pretty upset about that too. So he and along with all these notable people around the time in the 80s all put the ship together with finances and stuff like that. And he made it a reality. The ship was constructed down at Kwinana, proper marine architecture, Len Randall, and the hull was built upside down. So when you weld, you can't weld like that too well. You weld like that. And, you can weld like that, but it's not very good. And so they built the ship on those old traditions. The ship, as far as I know, as far as thickness and the hull and everything like that, we spent a lot of money on it down at Kwinana a while back, Henderson, and replaced some ballast and resheeted here and there, which the CEO, Carol, instigated at the time.
Is there anything that physically symbolises the ship itself? Is it part of the ship?
You know what? It's become absolute a state icon. I mean, to see the ship off the coast of anywhere from from Joondalup up southwards or anywhere around the state had a massive impact. The first time I ever saw that ship in the flesh was off Carnarvon up north, and it was like my childhood dreams had come true of sailing ships. Always loved sailing ships.
People in the eastern states think WA's behind the times.
What makes them think they're behind?
Facetious.
Yeah. Probably themselves thinking about themselves.
Saw the ship out at sea.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see, yeah.
I talked about this actually to Jay at some other point. Bar Sydney, or bar New South Wales, very few of the cities or the states have anything that really truly symbolises the state or the city.
Yeah.
It just seemed to me, after hearing the first encounters I had with people from Leeuwin, that potentially that was a Western Australian symbol.
Yeah, I think you're right. You've got just virtually one ship here, and it's the biggest tall ship in Australia, the fastest one.
A bit bigger than the Black Swan as well, so.
Yeah. There's quite a few ships over east at the time. I think their numbers have dropped, or the ships have been sold up, and New Zealand's got quite a few. But the Leeuwin is the Leeuwin, and it is a Western Australian icon. And when there was a lot of financial problems we had about 10 years ago, that ship, our beautiful ship, was going to be under threat back then, and people here and there just chipped in, because the story was they said, well, if it's not making money, then what's the use of it? Well, the Red Cross doesn't make money. Many other charitable organisations don't make money, and the Leeuwin does their best to make it money or get even, but it's got to be considered on those lines. So you want to see the ship out to sea? You support it. You want to see the ship moored off Freo or Cottesloe or Scarborough, up anywhere off the WA coast, it needs some support. So there was a bit of chipping in, and it was enough to, along with the CEO at the time, we kept the ship going, and it was good. There were a lot of directors came and went in the time I've been on board the whole show. But this is a big knockback, this damage that we've had now. And probably the biggest it is the biggest we've ever had. And to think that it's still surviving, and the circumstance that when a ship's tied up at wharf and the moving objects hit it, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
It was even news in Melbourne as far away, so.
Yeah.
It was shocking to me, because we'd only been really talking to Jay and a few others for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh my God, what's happened?
Yeah, I know. Everyone was in disbelief, in emotions.
What do you see for the future, though? Obviously, there's a chance for a rebirth here.
Yes, I think so.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Well, now that's under the new administration of Minderoo and Tattering, and plus this accident, it is a good opportunity to relabel, rebirth.
In a sense, it's the new one. It's whatever the next generation is.
Yeah, refurb, make it up to date with various modern practices, I suppose, but you still got to keep the authenticity of it.
Imagine balancing the tradition with contemporary knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I often wonder where it's worth going back to having a bunk system like the Endeavour. A hammock system like the Endeavour, the replica Endeavour, where you slept in hammocks instead of bunks. Hardly any seasickness in hammocks, because the hammocks are staying level while the ship's doing this. But in the bunks, as we've got in Leeuwin, there's plenty of motion in there, especially if you're up the front.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lunchtime I got on board 5 minutes, and I was
Yeah, yeah,
could work out why the sort of gangplank was
yeah,
wobbling around.
yeah. Go midships, get up on deck, and keep looking out to sea as far as you can.
So, if someone like me turns up over here, what would you tell them about the Leeuwin? I mean, if I said to you, what's the Leeuwin?
Yeah.
How would you answer that simply?
Virtually how I've sort of said it, I suppose. But I would say it's a ship that was built with the whole mindset of improving youth in Western Australia. It's a tool for doing that, but apart from that, it's also a ship that you can charter. It's a ship in its own right. It's got its own organisation. It's not a private thing as such. And depending on the question you'd ask, I would say it accordingly. I had a birthday on that ship a few years ago, just a few years ago. And that won't be forgotten by all the attendees, I know that.
Oh, okay. Don't think we'll record this story.
Yeah.
I think we're good. The thing that I'm sensing is that everybody has this sort of love and passion for the Leeuwin, probably for different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll say, I was up on the Tagallon, I was up on the forecourse, I was on the mizzen, or I was down underneath in the chain locker, or I was helping the chef down below deck, cleaning out the pantry, which was way below deck. They all have their stories for sure. Where do you start with those stories? If you ask me, I've done laps, I think, all over the ship myself, but I don't want to go.
How many voyages have you done?
I did 4 watch leader voyages, and I can't count how many actual individual voyages I've done, but I'd imagine about 30. Yeah. When I say that's including day sails and bits and pieces, or just being on the ship, or gone up there for a workshop occasionally under invitation, where we just moor off the coast here, and we'd just talk about have a whole team, and we just talk about the future and talk about how it's been going and everything like that. So the idea being, everyone just doesn't walk off the ship with a bit of a sore head the next morning. They walk off the ship with ideas and knowing that there's very little they have to do to keep the show running. Yeah.
Is there a lot of connection between different crews? Do they somehow connect or stay in touch?
And different crew.
If I've been on a voyage you have, would we automatically connect in some way?
Oh yeah. I mean, everyone's interconnectable. So the youngest or the most inexperienced trainee has communication straight to the captain. Not a problem. And there's no where you have to go to the watch leader first, and then up to blah blah blah. No, they can. There's one. We're all one. Everyone's all one, and the watch leaders are selected where they not necessarily have to be gun experienced people on board, but they have to be able to have a bit of a knack of connecting with kids and the trainees, and being able to give them as much confidence in being able to learn, and anything they ask questions and the watch leader doesn't know, the watch leader must have no problem at all saying, I'll come back to you on that, not make up some answer. And so, his responsibility is to go to the bosun or the first mate and say, what?
Bad about the Leeuwin?
No.
I'm tired of everybody telling me the good stuff.
No, I couldn't think of anything bad about it. You don't go on the Leeuwin for a luxury sail, put it that way. You can give it a go, but it doesn't work. And it's you can make that ship a lot more streamlined as far as sailing it go by putting winches and things like that on, but that's not the idea. It's the idea is to manage the ship ropes, and heavy ropes mean pulling, skinny ropes means letting out. And yeah.
That's great. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ken.
We're excited to be involved in this whole thing.
Yeah.
And every time you talk to someone, it gets a little better. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, give us a yell if I can be any more use, but I can certainly point you to people who would be, who would tell you things specifically what you might want to know.
Well, we're hungry for information.
Yeah.
We've been talking to a few people, but a few more to go. So.
Yeah, good.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ken.
Great.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Many.
That's right. We're going to explore them all. We all good to go? Hey, thanks for coming in and being part of this, because it's for us it's a huge learning thing, which is absolutely great. So why don't we start by telling us what's your involvement with the Leeuwin?
I started back in 2001 as a trainee. Came on board a adult eco voyage with Notre Dame and fell in love with the vessel and stayed. So have come and gone throughout the years, but came back as volunteer to begin with and just sort of built the sailing knowledge up. But for me, it was really about the transformation that happened on board and the difference it made to trainees. Like, I really loved the developmental side of the program. So sort of geared myself towards that and went on to become a program facilitator on day sails. So we used to take 100 kids out and run them through the program for the day and expose them to all the different elements of training in the ship. And hopefully they had a wonderful sailing day and remember it. And then went on to run the programs for the actual voyages. So taking out 14 to 25-year-olds. And back in the day, it was anywhere up to 11 days. We weren't doing overseas voyages at that point, but all the way up and down the coast from Darwin through to Esperance. So sailing up and down the coast in between uni and life, and worked full-time for Leeuwin sometimes, and then moved away and went to other ships or came back and moved it in between the other things I was doing in my life. So become a big part of my life, the sailing and the program, and then also the friends and the community. So I've got very big group of friends that have come from that first voyage and voyages on. So big community of Leeuwin people around me, and came back on board.
What was the single thing that attracted you on the first voyage? What was the moment?
I think actually the first night sailing out of Albany, we hit really rough weather. And I'd been out on boats before, but never sort of out sailing and never out to sea. And we hit some really big swells out in the Southern Ocean, and all the trainees went down, apart from myself and another trainee who ended up also working for Leeuwin in a years gone by. And I think it was the enormity of the challenge of taking out green sailors and taking out kids and putting them in this environment that's so foreign to what you're accustomed to, and just seeing how we all respond and how the crew responds, and being present to the vessel and how it holds you, and how the program works and how it unfolds over those first couple of days. I was just blown away. I was really, really blown away with the process and seeing the difference, and was fortunate didn't get seasick. So just was, sort of up for a couple of days, just really involving myself with everything, because there were lots of kids who were really unwell, and just really blown away with the beauty of the Southern Ocean and being at sea, but just watching how the vessel and the program works, and immersing myself in that. And yeah, was really hooked after that very first voyage. And I think we had all young adults, so it was pretty extraordinary. We were all at university. There was a lecturer on board and going through all the areas, the parklands we were going through, and the history of the area, maritime and Indigenous, as well as the flora and fauna. So that was a really fascinating way to see the coastline like that. But that heading out to sea that first night and being out in this pitch black with this rolling vessel and everyone down sick, and I was like, wow, this is something else. This is something else, yeah. So I sort of got that bug from the very beginning. But for me, it's the people element. I love being at sea, I love being on the ship, but it's how people come to know each other, how they work together, how that community unfolds and then comes back and folds into that larger community of people who may have been here from the outset or have joined along the way, all contributing different things, all coming from different walks of life. So I really love the community and the people that are involved and that hold Leeuwin and keep her so unique and extraordinary. So
That's the thing that's come across very quickly today, I think, particularly, is it really isn't about the ship itself. It's about the people on board and that experience.
Yeah, yep, yeah. And I think it's unusual because I've done quite a bit of different development work over the years with adults and teenagers, but because you go to sea and you take away all the other things that may otherwise distract you, take away screens and take away the problems of life and the routine of the day, people become very present to each other, and there's the time to speak and actually slow down and be and get to know each other. And often on a level, you know, under the stars when you're on watch for 4 hours, those conversations that open up that people don't always have the opportunity to or have the courage to sort of step into those conversations because you're in your normal life and you know you're returning to something else, so you hold yourself together. Whereas on the ship, people, you know, really sink into that mentality of being away and experiencing something new. And I think people are challenged as well by everything that it brings, being at sea and sailing and working such a large vessel. So it really sort of has people in that really sort of healthy state of change, like, you know, really sort of questioning their part in the world, that little blue vessel bobbing along the sea.
When the accident happened?
Oh, devastated. Devastated. I dropped my kids off to school just around the corner here, and it's, you know, I've always driven around the corner and there are the masts. And someone had called me and said, "Haven't you heard?" And I said, "No, I'm just dropping the kids off, I'll be in soon." He said, "The ship's been hit." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes like, "It's been hit really badly." And I was like, "Oh." And I didn't expect, obviously, to see no mast, so pretty devastating. But then rolled up and captain and a few of the old crewmates and people were standing around and sort of just taking heed and just assessing and being with each other. So, you know, sort of quickly assessed and there was no one hurt. So obviously that's the first and foremost, our crew were safe. And, you know, there were no trainees on board, which was wonderful. But, you know, it takes a little while to hit when the ship's been your home and you've been around it so many years and worked on board and in the office. There's a big part of your life kind of quickly gets torn away. So I was very quick to remind myself that it's the people and we're all safe. And the ship we can rebuild. We've done it once, we can do it again. We've got the skill set here. So sort of charged on with being optimistic about, we didn't see this coming, but it's perhaps an opportunity that we use as an organisation, as a training organisation, you know, to draw on that resilience and look at what the core foundation of Leeuwin is about and how do we draw on those strengths and those things that we teach at sea and provide the space to teach and learn about. How do we draw on that now as a community who's, you know, struck by something that's unprecedented? So, you know, it was shock, and obviously it was great to have such a great crew on board. Like, obviously the crew managed it very, very well, and the office was brilliant. You know, we had Matt, who was in a CEO position at the time, being a seafarer, just dealt with it so calmly, beautifully, really. Like, it was all about the people. It was checking in on everyone. It was obviously taking all the steps that needed to be taken, but it was managed really well, considering all that was happening and the amount of emotion that was around. So, yeah. And since I've stepped away, you do a little bit more processing of it all. And as I said, I feel very optimistic about the journey, having seen Leeuwin through different chapters, that we can do this. The state knows the worth of the value of the ship and what she does. So knowing the community that I do know over the years, I know there's enough strength, willpower and passion to make the ship sail again. So just sort of stepped into that positive space and saw it as an opportunity for us to grow and change and, yeah.
It's going to be a pretty emotional moment when it goes out to sea again.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful anytime you go to sea. Anytime those lines go, and all of a sudden you've been prepping, there's the freneticness of getting everything done, ship stalls, all the crew on, making sure the trainees are ready, that when you let the lines go, there is this wonderful feeling of like, okay, now we start. And there really is leaving the world behind. So anytime you let the lines go, it's pretty amazing, but it will be pretty mind-blowing to... Yeah, it absolutely will be. Yeah, so, and I'm envisaging by then, the community will be strong and will have been part of the process. So there'll be a lot of pride in getting it back out to sea and getting back to what we do best and what we all love and why we're all,
So for me as an outsider, I turn up here and I keep hearing all about the Leeuwin. And I go, how would you describe it to me? How would you tell a foreigner like me? You go, I say, what's the Leeuwin? What's all this talk about the Leeuwin?
Yeah.
How do you tell someone about that?
I generally start with, it's a pirate ship. It looks like a pirate ship because often people won't know what a three-masted barkentine is. If they haven't spent time in Fremantle, they might not have viewed the vessel. So I said, it looks like a pirate ship. I said, but it's purpose-built for sail training, and we provide a really extraordinary program that sort of is adaptable inside of its structure and how it is maintained, and it obviously shifts with each group you take out. Sometimes there's a different program due to the ecology of the area or a leadership program or the kids you have on board, so adjusting and morphing. But it's about taking people out of their comfort zone and taking them to sea and exposing them to life at sea and the routine of being a part of a big working crew that need each other, that rely on each other. And I said, I always tell all the kids, I often will go out and speak to kids and students, and my role previous to the accident was youth engagement. So speaking to schools, speaking to teachers, in particular speaking to parents and potential trainees to see where they're at, to listen for the concerns, to find out what it is they need to know to be able to make the choice freely to go, great, this is an opportunity I really want. So, I'm very passionate about the fact that everyone has a chance to shine, to show their gifts and their skill set. It's not structured like a classroom, so you don't have that same experience of perhaps pecking order or people being in the role that they're perceived to play or may have been pigeonholed into, that they get an opportunity to try all different things on board, whether it be in the galley, whether it be helping the engineer up aloft, being next to that person who's seasick who just needs someone to stand with them and just say, it's going to be all right, I'll get you some water, we'll get through this. It's seeing people shine in different ways, and often the ways they don't know they can or haven't seen themselves in that light. But so it's a great opportunity to get out and to be a part of a big crew and to learn how to sail a beautiful vessel. So obviously that feeling of setting sail with 16 sails and all the might and power it takes is beautiful to be at sea under sail. So that's not so succinct about what I would tell people, but it's a real journey of discovery for each person, and I think each person's is slightly different, although we're on the same ship in the same program. And I think that's what attracts so many volunteers and people in community from all around, is that it's, that real smorgasbord of life on a very small space. And for me, that's, that community that's built, and that trust and that connection that happens is mind-blowing.
There's obviously a real love and pride amongst those who have sailed.
Yeah.
What about the community outside of that? And what about people in Perth? How widely known is the Leeuwin? Does everybody know? Do most of the people know?
Yes and no. I think my era of friends, the era before when we were really, really busy and sort of sailing, 350 days a year, everyone knew what we did. Most people had been on a voyage. They'd known someone who'd been on a voyage. They knew someone who crewed on board. So it was very, very well known in those original years when we were sailing flat out, when there weren't as many programs on offer. And this is obviously over the years we've noticed that with so many different programs available going overseas, the Kimberleys over east, a lot of schools will come and sail with us for a little while, and then they'll go and try different things, which is understandable. But coming back, I've noticed that there's a lot of the young community don't know we exist, don't know we're here, have no idea what the Leeuwin is, which I always find puzzling because it's been such a big part of my life and I'm Freo way. But there's, I suppose, just understand that some people just don't have that exposure. Yeah, in years gone by, I think everyone knew about us. We were iconic because we also had the other vessels built around the same time, Endeavour and Leeuwin. So lots of people in West Australia were involved with the building, the fundraising, the social scene of. And that's morphed and changed. I think there are many people are still involved. But it's also interesting watching that it's something that you really most people become quite deeply involved. That there's not many periphery side players. People may sail once every now and again, but most people will come and be a part of the community, the social events, the training. So there's an immersion of people who are here, and then there's the outside community, which seems to have less knowledge at this point. So we were always we were waiting for that beautiful media launch. We were waiting for that big shift from the era we come from over the last year and a half. We just got one a little different than we expected.
I'm sure the accent put it on the map.
It certainly did,
For
yeah.
a lot of reasons, but
Just wasn't the advertising we'd booked, but here we are. So, we'll use it as best we can. So people know about us again. I've had people from all over the world, literally, within the hour or 2 hours of it happening, I had texts coming from around the world going, is everyone okay? Where is it at? What's happened? It's one of those tall ship communities that, wide and they're spread across the world, but they're also quite unique and small. So, people keep their eye on the game, what's happening at other places. So Leeuwin was obviously very well known very quickly what had happened because it was an unusual incident. Yeah.
is there anything that is iconic about the ship? Is there anything that symbolises the spirit of the ship or the boat itself? I mean, for me, I'm kind of looking at this kind of going, it's not the ship. The ship's just there. It's what it represents or what it stands for.
Yeah, I think on a simple level, symbolically, trainees over the years and worldwide will often put a Turk's head, which is a simple tying knot looking like a plait, either on their ankle or their wrist when they finish a voyage. And quite often it will be the colour of the watch they're in. So we have 4 different coloured watches: green, blue, white and red. And those 4 watches alternate around the watch system. So it'll be red watch to dinner or blue watch to the main mast. So often they'll have a Turk's head. So quite often when you're travelling or you're around about, you see someone with a Turk's head, it's you sail on Leeuwin. So automatically people will recognise that. And if they haven't sailed on Leeuwin, they will have sailed on another tall ship. It's quite sort of symbolic. So that's a very simple measure. So you see people and you know.
Does that happen on other ships?
Yes, yeah, it's quite a thing around the world. So people, if they've sailed on a tall ship, will often have a Turk's head as a memento and at some point cut it off or, leave it until it falls off crusty and old and, it's lived to tell the tale. But I would say it's that feeling of belonging in a place you might not have expected, because most people haven't been to sea. Not for extended periods. They might have had a bit of exposure on boats. Being in West Australia, obviously lots of families will get out and do recreational sports and activities and sailing. But that sense of belonging where you've found friends and learnt from masters and been exposed to that lifestyle, it's just something so unique and people really embrace it. So I think ultimately there's this sense of coming home when you get back to the vessel and go sailing, and there's also that welcomeness that if you don't know the crew, you want to get to know them, whether it be volunteers or permanent crew. There's that desire to be a part of it and to make the difference that the vessel does through the program. So most people who stick around are generally really engaged with how people transform on board and how people see themselves differently when they step off. And watching that process, as a volunteer or a crew member, to watch particularly a teenager come on board who may not have really been engaged with the process, mum and dad may have asked them to, they may have been going with the school, or they'd give it a go but hadn't given it much thought, get on nervous, sort of not knowing what to expect, green sailors, and then step off, 7, 8, 10 days later, in love with the vessel, feeling like they belong, knowing themselves to be stronger and more resilient and a part of something that they perhaps never ever perceived. That's a really beautiful thing. It's a really moving thing when you see, 40 trainees get on and they don't know each other and they're nervous and they get off and it's all, nowadays it's, they're all, making sure they've got each other's numbers and catching up, but there really is that connection. And parents will often say, what did you do to my child? Where's my child? Where are they gone? And I said, yeah, different kid.
I've heard that before.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
believable. Covered a few things that I wanted to explore. But I'm kind of more interested, I think, in the experiences, the individual things. What good things have you seen on board? What bad things have you seen on board?
First and foremost, I think the friendships. It becomes very obvious, those friendships and that support, particularly on that physical level when anyone is seasick and you're feeling treacherous and you don't know when that's going to end. That can feel that's really tough. And we all know as a crew, it's all right, you'll pull through. You will be okay, and we watch and monitor and make sure kids are hydrated and, making sure that they're safe inside of that pocket of seasickness. But those friendships that come when all the layers and all the looking good is stripped back, because you can't look good vomiting. So very quickly, those people are all in the same boat. They're all in the same position, and from the outset, it kind of takes away some of that concern of facade or looking good. So teenagers are so in their own heads about how they fit and do they fit and where's my place, that very quickly they feel at home because they're all in that same position and they can actually empathise with each other. They often don't realise that's what it is at the time, but watching that connection, that friendship, and then to see how each person takes that throughout the voyage. So obviously some kids run with it and just throw themselves in wholeheartedly and get involved with everything and are just really there for the full experience. Others sit back on the sideline, watch for a little while and sort of figure out how they want to be involved or, who they want to hang with. You are within a watch, but you do get the exposure to all of the kids who are on board. So watching those individuals sort of go through their journey of discovery and sort of challenge themselves. Obviously on a physical level, they're challenged. But even that notion of getting up in the middle of the night, having to stand in cold weather or be out in the sunshine all day, physically it's a challenging thing, which also helps with that mindset change and the transformation that happens. So for me, it's about watching the individuals that then form up each watch, and then a greater group, which is the full, the full 40 trainees. But inside of that, watching again the volunteers who come together. Some have sailed together before, some haven't. So that process happens with them as well. And then the crew with the volunteers, because obviously, again, you don't always get to sail with the same people. So the crew are pretty dynamic and great at being able to adapt and knowing they've got some people who may be on all the time and they're regulars and they know them very well personally and they know where they sail and what their skill set is. And then others who float in and out and just sail every now and again. So it's a really, it's that dynamic of watching those relationships and people come out of their shell or, be challenged. So even with volunteers who are challenging themselves each time they come back to learn something new or to figure out new skill sets with the group work, whether it be communication or team building. I really love the people that are involved and the difference it makes and them coming back.
Obviously, everybody's kind of involved. Is there anything you'd change about anything around the Leeuwin itself? Is there anything you kind of go, you can tell me you're not talking to anybody else?
La 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 la. Over there. Look, again, over the years, I've sort of worked in and out of the office and the ship, And obviously, being not-for-profit, there's always the need for more funds. It's an expensive platform to run and a very dynamic platform to run. So it's quite an unusual skill set, and people, when they jump on board, have to really find their way. So it's interesting to watch the recreation of the organisation each time a new CEO steps in, or even a new crew, because even though the program runs and the ship runs the way it does, each captain runs a ship and a crew slightly differently. So it's watching the highs and lows of that, and obviously when there's not a lot of money, sometimes that's really tricky. And people are under the pump and working really long hours, and they love the work, they love the development things that are going on, they love the sailing. But obviously it's something that a lot of seafarers will have to move on to get more sea time and make more money. So it's one of those tricky things financially. It's always been in somewhat difficult times. And then we have, prosperous times when sailing schedule's all brilliant and filled, and there's a really tight-knit crew, and it all seems to roll along, and then take one or two pieces out of that, and then you're reforming. So that change can be brilliant, and at times it hasn't been. Whether the right person hasn't been chosen as the leader, whether the right person people haven't been chosen on the ship, sometimes the dynamics just don't work. So obviously when you're in the thick of it, it's up close and personal, particularly on the ship, because you do live together. You're in very close confines. So over the years, I think, probably a bit more support provided for crew and their training inside of not the sailing and the safety management, but more looking at how they develop themselves. How do they hold that space for their crew, for their volunteers? How do they interrelate with the office? It's something that's always been a bit tricky, ship and shore, and I think that's in all maritime industries. But, so I suppose with more finance, more time, more training for the crew and for the office, so they understand what happens at sea, how does it work, so they can empathise and feel what needs to be filled from the shore side, likewise from the ship. So it's been one of those things over the years, not that it's a given, but it works for people to have sailed on the ship, to understand how it works, to feel that passion that those people who do go out all the time feel. And even if it's not for them, at least they can see it and experience it, So, an open wallet forevermore would be fantastic to just keep making, the program stronger and really allowing all West Australian teenagers, and I love adult voyages are brilliant as well. So, personally, I'd love all West Australians to have the opportunity to go sailing, and anyone else from anywhere else. Obviously, we have people from over east and overseas, but the opportunity to just experience it is something else. And I think I would give that to anyone if I could. That even if it's a once-off or it's something you fall in love with, the experience is extraordinary. So. Yeah.
Well kept secret though. I wasn't particularly aware of it. I knew there was something there, but I could never have described it.
Yeah. Our program's quite different as well. I mean, obviously, Melbourne, you've got the Enterprise, and the Elmo de Pel has been, lovingly restored, and South Australia's got one and all, and we've got vessels all around Australia that provide sail training programs. Leeuwin is really unique, and whether it's because of how the founders and how Malcolm's dream came together and the community that supported that, there's just something so unique about how the program runs and how the development works, and those core values that the community hold. I've sailed in a few.
How is it different from other programs?
I think it's the community. I think it's that there's tradition there, and there's always someone passing down that tradition, whether it be the seafarers or someone from the office or someone from business that have supported Leeuwin. There's a huge community that spanned 38 years, and some of their vessels over east have that longevity, not quite as long as that, but don't seem to have the community support. Weren't engaged in that first process where they sent out thousands and thousands and thousands of teenagers and adults to sail on Leeuwin because it was, we didn't have anything else like this. and it was really seized upon. So whether that first lot of marketing was profound and just hit a time when the state needed and wanted and desired a platform like Leeuwin, but I think the community and how it's been held over the years and the great camaraderie and the friendships that are made continues on, and people will flow in and out at different times. There is differences in the program as well. And I think that not all ships run with volunteers. There's often paid watch leaders, but that volunteer basis where people really give of themselves and commit to making the difference to someone is quite unique, because often people are paid and they love it and they build up their sea time, but then there's something else inside of having volunteers there where people get to give back that opportunity. They get to come back and learn more. They get exposure to master mariners and first mates and engineers from all over the world and chefs. So that opportunity to come back and keep learning and be a part of it is big for Leeuwin, and bigger than most other vessels I've sailed or been a part of. So
You've sailed on other vessels?
yeah. Not as much as Leeuwin. She's still my first and foremost love. So
Sounds like you've been untrue there. Where else have you sailed?
so I worked on the One and All in Adelaide, and have done a little bit of time on Leeuwin and Endeavour, just day sails, no voyaging, and then also a couple of ships in Europe, so re-rigging and sailing. So can I grab a glass of water, please? Yeah, so Europe's a different scene again, and we were over in Europe and we're hoping to set a program up similar to Leeuwin to provide in Copenhagen, but unfortunately the GFC hit and Denmark was the first to go, so our jobs quickly evaporated. But their programs were quite different, and they have school ships, they have some beautiful programs, but again, the volunteers and how the community's involved is something really, and there's volunteers all around the world, so many vessels have it, but the core of Leeuwin, and again, I think probably the mainstays, the people that stay and like hold guard for what we hold dear to us about Leeuwin, whether it be the vessel, the community, the difference we make with teenagers and adults alike, there's just something that binds us crazy Leeuwinites. Thanks. Yeah.
You're pretty good. I just need to find someone who hates it.
We
Find the contrary position. Everybody's
yeah.
Go driving the container ship.
I think the insurance company is probably not too keen on it.
Yeah. Look, I think people also go through chapters. I know I've stepped away a few times when sometimes you're a bit burnt out, sometimes other opportunities come out, but there is a bit of an immersive nature to many people who become involved. So you tend to love it and you love the people and it's a good lifestyle and seeing the coastline. So sometimes you can throw yourself in for a couple of years and then take a break, you go do something else. So I know that there's definitely been burnout over the time. And that's also the nature of the beast working with teenagers. You know, it's pretty hardcore at times, and some voyages are fantastic and you've got kids who are gung-ho and well-behaved and all tickety-boo, and other voyages, not as many, like our voyage programs have very much changed over the years. We're not doing juvenile delinquent voyages anymore, and you know, we used to do some trying ones with IRs who are training to be out at sea as an integrated rating, and some of those thought they were the bee's knees.
Allowed to throw them overboard?
Well, we thought about it. We might have mentally a few times, but no, and that's where the work comes in. That's where that development comes in. So it doesn't matter that you've got some time on a fishing vessel. This is a sailing ship and we're here to do this. So looking at how do we adapt that program for adults and young adults, not just teenagers, to make it workable so they can take those skill sets and hone them while they're on board, and then take them into the workplace. So, you know, there's been retrying times, and there's been times where trainees just do the wrong thing and people get, you know, emotionally hurt, or, you know, there's been some small accidents along the way, which sometimes are inevitable, weather and being out there, you know, can be a bit curly at times. So I would say, yeah, there's the step away, which many people will do because they've been immersed, and they'll take some time out, take a breather, and then come back. Because eventually you go, okay, I'm missing it now. I've had my break. I've stepped away from either crew members or times that were hard, and I'm ready to come back. So, and I think that long-time Leeuwinites are very much like that. We often have to step away, you know, refill the love cup somewhere else and take time out because it can be really intense. Yeah, so, oh yeah, there's, look, I hate not working for them at the moment. But no, there's not much about, you know, no, I can't say there's much about Leeuwin I hate, to tell the truth. There isn't sort of, you wouldn't keep coming back if you did, I think. So, and that's one of those things, I don't generally get seasick, but I've sailed with people who get seasick every time they go out. And I just think, wow, that's real commitment, because it doesn't feel great. And some people will last for a day or two, some people can feel sick the whole voyage, but they still come back because they love the experience and they're willing to go through that. And I take my hats off, you know, I think, wow, that's impressive to feel that bad, but to still want to be here, to be part of the program, to be out sailing, you know, that's real commitment. And yeah, so.
So far sitting here, I haven't got seasick and I'm feeling quite reasonable. So
Excellent.
I think we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
We get a photo.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
No, it was a terrific moment actually, because he was trying to really convince me to get involved, and he's having me jump on his paper thin shells for a boat. And
Yeah.
he's got to give me a vision. Come on, try and break that. He said, but don't injure yourself.
Yeah.
And then the final bit, after we'd gone through talking about the technology, and I had a photograph on the wall about, I can't remember which crew member broke his arm.
Yes. John, not
being
John.
up the mast.
Yeah.
And there's this photograph of this guy hanging in the middle of nowhere. John said that will never happen again. And you know, anyway, it was great. And we were part of the boat that broke in half.
Yep.
And got John's message to the crew. He texted to me overnight, and you know, we're all kind of
Devo.
in the halftime huddle at football.
Yep.
You know, we're going to go and do it. You know, we haven't got the best boat now. We know we haven't got the best, but we're going to go and do it. We're going to go and fight. And yeah, so I learned a little bit about sailing around that time.
Fantastic. It's a great way to learn it, though. What a time.
Avoid the shipwrecks. That's for sure. Good to
Great.
go. So, Lawson, thanks for being part of this.
Thank you.
I reckon we should start by having you explain why you joined. Why did you become part of this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was in a job where things were really fat, dumb, and happy. It was a great job. I could rock up to work. I was the state general manager for Australian Sailing. We had everything dialed in. We had our club sorted. We'd done a lot of hard work in getting everything done, and you know, I was aware of what had happened to the Leeuwin as I was building up the Australian Sailing side of things. And I'm new to not-for-profits, but I love my sailing. You know, aware of what had happened with Leeuwin going into Docker. And I sort of thought, like a lot of people did, oh, you know, gee, that's sad. You know, hope they'll get through it. When I first moved to Perth in 2017, I'm a sailor from way back. You know, Leeuwin was part of the foreshore there. This was one of the very first places I came to check out the museum and Leeuwin and you know, all of the waterfront stuff. And so while I wasn't across Leeuwin as a vessel at the time, she was always in the back of my consciousness as a resident of WA, a born again sandgroper. And as I said, I was in a great job, fat, dumb, and happy. We were travelling really well with Australian Sailing. We were rolling out our courses. We were getting on very well with the yacht clubs. Had a great relationship with the Department of Sport and Rec, and we were getting more than our fair share of funding and really doing some good stuff. And I was approached, and somebody said, "Look, would you like to have a look at this?" And I thought, "Nah, I'm happy where I am. That looks like a lot of hard work." And then I had a bit of a discussion. I sat down with the recruiter, and he sort of explained what had happened and what was going on with the organisation. And I knew that it had gone through some turmoil, and I knew that there were some political issues because just through friends and things that were associated. And he explained that obviously there's been a new broom. The board had changed. There was good money behind the organisation with Minderoo, and that there was great backing. And I thought, well, okay, this has started to get interesting in that there's an opportunity here to get involved in a storied organisation, but be able to influence the outcome of it. And that's why I started to listen, to get involved. The process was actually quite funny in that obviously there was a bit of urgency from Leeuwin's side, and when I started to get involved in the interview process, the very first interview was done online, and if you've been to the boardroom in Minderoo, there's this massive long table that stretches for metres, and the cameras at one end, and Jay and Matt and Rachel were all sat down the other end, and I logged on, and they're 100 miles away with these tiny little faces at the end of the table, and I couldn't see anybody. Put my glasses, couldn't see anybody at the end of the table, and then we just started talking, and it was exactly sort of 29 and a half minutes. We logged on time and logged off on time, and because of the sort of perceived distance, I found it difficult to connect. And so I hung up the phone call and went, wow, that was nice to be considered, and sort of felt, okay, well, I've blown that. And it wasn't until the next day that the recruiter said, oh, look, they'd like to talk to you a bit more. I went, oh, okay, that's interesting. But that's when I was able to sit down, and it was really talking with Jay and with Matt Neil about the business itself and about some of the challenges that were being faced. And that I realised that actually, we've got a board here that is motivated. It's a small board. They want the Leeuwin to succeed, and they've got the means to help the organisation succeed. There's good people behind it. So that was a real impetus for me to start thinking about, against my wife's better judgment, about accepting the role. She liked the fact that I was not stressed, and that I was home on time and had my weekends and things like that, and things were dialed in. So that was the real reason that and I think it speaks well of Jay and the board that every concern that I had was, and every question that I had was answered probably before I'd even asked the question, and that important things like how does the Constitution look these days? What's the delegation of authority? What are the tools that I've got in order to get stuck into this? All of those initial questions were answered, and they said, "Here you go. This is what it's like." So that was really reassuring. The proof of that was after I accepted the role, and I'd been during my gardening period with Australian Sailing. I'd spent a fair bit of time down here with Matt Neil in particular, who was acting as CEO. But I was involved in a lot of the meetings and a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of planning, going on, which I was included into, and I liked that because I was able to. Here we go. I've got a real opportunity to hit the ground running here, and I was able to do that because my other role that I was stepping out of was actually under control. That wasn't an issue. We had somebody ready to go in. I'd trained somebody up ready to take over, so I didn't have that stress. And that helped as well. I was going, okay, I've got a good handle on this. I'm not coming into a complete vacuum. And then the accident happened, and that was a really interesting sort of call.
What was the biggest, say, surprise, or what was the biggest thing that was might have upset any preconceptions that you had in terms of the Leeuwin itself? You know, what did you know about the Leeuwin, and then was there anything that was out of kilter with that, or a pleasant surprise or a disappointment?
The thing that I supposed that the initial concern or the initial sort of jarring bit was there's this beautiful sailing ship that was, you know, I knew at that point, I knew before I was approached that Leeuwin was Australia's biggest sail training ship, the only three-masted one that was the square rigger that was out there doing what she does. And it sort of struck me that being allowed to go into administration was a bit of an own goal. You know, it was like how has the stewardship of this storied organisation, this fabulous ship, been allowed to get into this choppy sea? And for me, that was a surprising bit. But then, you know, sort of thinking it through and sort of, you know, with the benefit of hindsight now, I suppose, like a lot of organisations, they can be victims of their own success or victims of layers of reputational, you know, good stories and things like that, but sort of believing your own hype a little bit. And I think that might have been one of the issues. But, you know, it was also described that this was a cyclical thing. And, you know, it was just a matter now of say, how do we reset? The other surprise was that as a community organisation that did rely on, you know, grants and things like that, that there was no real federal or state programs or funding that the organisation could rely on. So it was really up to the organisation to beg, borrow, steal where it could. So that was a surprising factor to me, because I obviously was aware of the fact that Young Endeavour is, you know, supported by the federal government and Navy, and that's quite a well-known program. So, you know, it was a bit of a surprise to me as I started to get involved.
How much did you actually know of the boat itself?
Prior to being involved?
Prior to being involved?
Oh, look, not a lot.
Just from a distance?
Yeah, from a distance. You know, I've been sailing since I was 7, dinghies and keelboats. Grew up in Sydney, so tall ships. There's the James Craig. It's been rebuilt ever since I was a teenager. Now she's sailing again. Spent some time living in Melbourne, and the Polly Woodside was there. We'd wave at the Polly Woodside as we went past the quay. So always an affection for tall ships. But none of my sailing experience is on anything bigger than an offshore sailing yacht, and that's essentially where I did most of my sailing.
So first impression when you saw it?
Beautiful ship. She's a beautiful ship, and I think, you know, if a ship looks beautiful, it's one of those things that she'll sail beautifully, and they are, because I've been sailing all of my life, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in some excellent boats, that the I suppose beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I mean, universally, she's just seen as being a beautiful, beautiful ship, and you know, all the proportions. When, you know, some of those photographs of her under full sail, it's just like, oh my God, you know, ship porn.
What's the one thing that stands out about the ship itself? I've asked the question in different ways, but, you know, basically, symbolically, what denotes the ship?
I think that it embodies a lot of what, you know, as an outsider to Western Australia, Western Australians are very independent, very proud of perhaps even the distance from the East Coast. And I think Leeuwin is almost seen to be a bit of an embodiment of that. You know, she's a gorgeous, proud ship, and equally, you know, the people who sail on her are proud of being part of that ship. But the ship, by the same token, appears to be proud of where she is. And I think, you know, there's a sense of place about Leeuwin that, you know, she's part of Western Australia. Western Australia's part of her.
Yeah, I think one of the things for us non-sailors is appreciating the things that you would see as valuable in that thing and the beauty of that. As a designer, I see shape and form and things like that, but you would view it quite differently. When you talk to people about Leeuwin, people who don't know maybe, what do you tell them about it? How do you describe it?
Yeah, it's a great question. How do I describe the Leeuwin? It's been quite easy to talk to my friends and family who are not perhaps WA residents or are not sailors about what I'm doing, because once you start to describe the work we do or the work that the ship has done, it's very quickly picked up on, and I haven't ever really sort of had to go back and explain what it is we do or why we do it. I'm involved in a few other organisations as well. Black Dog Ride, which is a wonderful one, is a similar sort of organisation in that the people who know about the organisation understand what it does. And in that regard, I think Leeuwin as an organisation really punches above its weight in terms of what even outsiders, people outside of the Leeuwin community, are aware of not only the ship but of the organisation and of the sort of work that it does, particularly for the young people of Western Australia. And they realise, you know, everybody that has ever walked past the ship down on the quay there, or has ever gone to the museum, or there's just a level of knowledge of the vessel that is, you know, it's almost drilled into people's subconscious. You know, there's a subconscious recognition of the ship, and it's being part of the fabric of particularly Fremantle, but also of Western Australia.
So as an East Coast person with 3 heads,
One head's fine. I'm an East Coast person, so that's okay, Ken.
okay, what's the word? What's the short answer to that?
Great question. Inspiration.
Okay, good answer. Because there seems to be two very distinct components to this. One's the vessel itself, and the other's the result of what it delivers, or the experience that it delivers. And I'm starting to think that the ship is actually quite secondary, that it's just a facilitator for...
That's absolutely correct. But what a wonderful, beautiful image of it, and I think, you know, that's the beauty of what we're doing. You know, we've got such an you know, I hate this bloody word icon, but you know, the ship is iconic and it is instantly recognisable. It's
what makes it recognisable?
just you know, her 3 masts, her big blue hull. She's been part of that quay for 38 years, and you know, everybody who's been here has visited WA has almost always come down to Fremantle. If they've gone to Rottnest, they'll have jumped on a ferry and sailed past. I know I did my very first trip. And you go, wow, that's gorgeous.
So it's a long way back.
Yeah, right. So you know, it's part of the furniture. It's almost, you know, Sydney Harbour Bridge, Opera House type of background that's always there. You know, and I suppose, and the Opera House is interesting because, you know, that was, my father was involved in helping the city of Sydney celebrate the opening of the Opera House. And we were on one of the Manly ferries when, I've forgotten the name of the Aboriginal guy, was up on the top of the sail. And it was just, that was an incredible thing. I was just a kid, young boy, but on one of the Manly ferries and on the opening day, and I just remember it really clearly. But the Sydney Opera House has always been there, you know, and that's kind of what I think about Leeuwin as a born again. Yeah, there you go. It was pretty gruesome as a site before she's built, that's for sure.
It's interesting. How do you think it varies from other tall ships in Australia?
Oh, look, size has got something to do with it. The format of, you know, she's the largest sail training ship in Australia. As a tall ship, she's not the single biggest one, but you know, being the three-masted format is unique. There's just the look about her. She looks right, and I think that goes a long way to sort of cementing her beauty is one thing. You know, she's a beautiful looking ship, but you know, now when I think of a tall ship, you know, I see three masts. I see a bowsprit that's pointing to the sky, not to the horizon, and a cloud of sails.
Tell me about the future for Leeuwin.
This is
Once you have a picture of this you shoot.
yeah, this is great. You know, the accident was an awful thing, but at the same time, what it's presented us with is a wonderful opportunity to reset. We don't have the pressures of the commercial pressures of having to deliver voyages right now while we help rebuild the business side of things. And we've got a board that is incredibly supportive, and I've sort of said this before, but you know, they're looking at all aspects of what we do, and the old sort of thinking in the past of, you know, this is what we've always done, or this is how we've always done it, is now out the window. We can actually look at new things and propose new things, and look at perhaps some new technology when we do rebuild the ship that we might not have had the opportunity to look at in the past. And so there's some really exciting things, not only from rebuilding the business as an example, but the ship itself. We've got an opportunity now through a refit, through the repair of the rig, to ensure that she sees at least another 15 or 20 years worth of service. And, you know, by extension, 15 or 20,000 more people going through the sail program the leadership's programs that we provide. So, you know, again, building on what we've done in the past, but not being tied to the past, acknowledging it and improving on it, and saying, okay, this is what we're going to be doing in the future. I think it's a really exciting time. The accident was awful, but it's given us an opportunity to help close the door on the past, on DOCA, on going into administration, and come out of it with a clean set of heels, and get into where we're going. So I'm excited.
So the bit that we're involved in, what's that got to convey? What's the brand got to convey?
Yeah.
To those who encounter it?
Yeah, this is. You asked me before what was one of my reasons for getting involved with Leeuwin. It was because this opportunity on helping reset where we're going, particularly with you and your business and your knowledge, having that opportunity, which is an absolute advantage that very few other businesses get. So. And I think you know of my background. I'm a fan of building brands. I think the opportunity we have now is to build, and Leeuwin as a brand is already quite strong, but I think we've got the opportunity to really cement Leeuwin as you know, again, horrible word, iconic status, but I mean, we've got the opportunity to really tell everybody in Western Australia in particular, but you know, all of Australia, that this is an incredible organisation, incredible ship, but an incredible opportunity for a lot of people to experience an amazing experience. Right, sorry about that. So the brand being able to build the brand as we rebuild the business, as we rebuild the ship, is a fantastic convergence of I suppose energies and us being able to, when we go through this process and come out of the other end, have all of these threads come together to build something that's probably bigger than, you know, each of the individual small pieces. And I think I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the coming months as we build the ship, as we build our programs, as we move into a new office, hopefully, touch wood, and as we, you know, relaunch our brand back onto the public, saying we're back, you know, come down and get a piece of it.
I wonder about how focused the current view is from the board and from being Western Australian focused, where I would have thought this is potentially national importance. You know, and people who send people on training courses don't just send them around the corner, they'll send them somewhere different.
Yep.
So there's a real story to tell. I just trying to put this in a broader framework. It's really easy to see, for me, it's easy to see how it can fit Perth and West Australia, and just drops in there pretty comfortably. Everybody's very familiar.
And I agree with you. You know, as a old ex-East Coaster, well, you know, I grew up in. You can't always leave the past behind. I'm lucky in that I left the East Coast in 2000. So you know, I'm not that not so bad. I haven't been banished or had the eye roll, the West Australian eye roll, of being a wise man from the East. But you know, one of the things I see about Leeuwin is that it's as West Australian as Wave Rock. And everybody over East understands what Wave Rock is, maybe without having visited it. And, you know, almost I think to a person, anybody that does go and visit Wave Rock goes, okay. But it's has the potential to be as recognisable as a West Australian thing as something like Wave Rock actually represents as well, and for me, I think that's quite right. We shouldn't be shy of the fact that, you know, not only is a sail training vessel we're the most productive in the country, but pretty much, you know, the oldest continually operating sail training vessel out there, and obviously the biggest as well. So, you know, there are a few things on there that we can and probably should, and perhaps in the past we haven't, beat our chests about, and there's no reason we shouldn't.
So I've got three really good questions here.
Here we go.
That you provided. So I can ask you your own question.
All right. This is Alex provided. You go easy on me, Alex.
So, what do you think the Leeuwin's mission statement should be going forward?
Okay, well, really to inspire young people to be the best, to make the best of themselves, but also to be leaders of the future. I think our job. I think I used the word inspire before. I'm really. I think that's one of the cornerstones of what our mission should be, is to provide that inspiration, that sense of adventure.
Okay. And what are the 5 words you use to describe
Inspirational. Yeah, adventure.
Inspiration.
Yeah. Inspire. Adventure. I suppose self-belief, believing in oneself. I mean, there's a few extra words in that, but that self-belief is something I think that that the mission should be bringing out in people. Independence. Did I say adventure? I did say adventure. And the final one is, I hate to use the word mateship, but fellowship. Being able to build friendships and that sort of thing amongst the peers that go sailing together.
All right, and if you could change one thing about the foundation, what would that be?
If I could change one thing about the foundation, I'm changing lots of things at the moment. I feel like I've been playing whack-a-mole, and I've used this a couple of times since I started. If I could change one thing about the foundation, I think that would be to keep it nimble, as it kind of is now. Obviously, we need a little bit more broad as we come out of administration and we move into the future. We've got to be careful about not becoming top heavy. I think in the past there's been a bit of there's been a bit of top heaviness of the organisation. I think we need to remain being nimble, and I think the reason that we've been able to navigate the last 12 months is the agility of the board, but also of the people involved. And there's agility of management, but also agility and the resilience of our volunteers and our staff, and that's been really important in being able to survive the last 12 months. I think getting through DOCA was probably the toughest assignment that was in front of the organisation, but I don't think there's enough credit given to the importance of getting through that process, getting through administration and coming out of the other side of it. The accident has probably got a lot more press, and it's a lot more it's a lot more visible, and it's more visceral, I suppose, in that there's some wreckage, and it's quite sad, and there was a lot of emotion attached to that. But at the end of the day, Leeuwin, beautiful as she is a thing that can be repaired and put back into service. The foundation itself is what gives that life, and it's the foundation, I think, when it's become perhaps top heavy or slow or perhaps trapped in the past, is where I think we've tripped ourselves up in the past. And being nimble, being able to take advantage of opportunities as they arise, thinking out of the box. These are all things that I think that the current board's committed to, and our volunteers and our staff, and certainly I am, is committed to trying these new things and giving it a go. Not just, we tried that in the past and perhaps it didn't work, or that's not the way we've done things in the past. We've got to get beyond that that sort of mentality and give it a go.
I think the passion is definitely there with the people we've spoken.
Oh yes.
And it's relatively intense. So
Yeah.
More power to you. That's terrific.
And I think, look, going back to when the ship was built, when the idea came out, it was a couple of people that got together and said, "This is a great idea, let's do it." And it wasn't about, this is too hard, we don't think we can. It was, let's get on with it and get it done. And that's also a byproduct of the 80s as well, right? Because you could do that. You could weld a ship together upside down on the beach and then push it in the water and she's all good. But there's a bit of that we need to recapture. A little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, a little bit of being able to, can do. We've had our lumps. We'll take those. Let's push on and do what we can to get out of it, and use this as an opportunity to be better, to improve.
There's no truth in the room that you guys engineered this accident.
My wife thinks I did.
Yeah, pretty well done for a reason.
My wife thinks I did. She looked at me that morning and just sort of said, "Look, I've got to go at 6 o'clock in the morning. The kids are getting, the kids aren't even up to get ready to school." And she's looked at me and says, "You haven't even started the job yet, and you're blowing me off." I said, "See you later, guys."
Well, I've got to say, even in my office, it kind of shook the office a bit.
Mm.
It was just such a surprise,
Yes.
where you're saying, "Oh, yeah, we've got to work on this," and then next thing you see, it's in
Boom.
there. And I went, "Oh my God, this is terrible." And I thought, maybe not. Maybe this is quite good.
And your mind goes at 100 miles an hour. Mine went, "Oh, I've just joined this thing. Am I going to be the last person turning out the lights, or what's going to happen?" But really, very quickly, it was really apparent, not just from a board perspective, that there was a real willingness to see this through, but all of the volunteers, all of the staff. There were people just coming out of the woodwork to say, "Look, we're here. What can we do?" That was heartening. The other really interesting bit was that, and this is kudos to Minderoo, while they're great at writing cheques, they're really good at writing cheques. The flip side of that is there's nothing for free, really, and Minderoo do expect us to be able to perform professionally and to be responsible with the funding that we do get. Funding aside, an organisation like Minderoo was able to really sort of add value, and this came out post-accident, immediately post-accident. There were crisis management people involved. There were people from OH&S that were there. The Minderoo chaplain was there with our volunteers and our staff, talking about the mental health aspects of things. There was insurance geniuses all over it, saying these are the things that we need to do. This is what you can't say in front of various people. This is what you should be doing. We had these coaches, these life coaches in various disciplines, that were parachuted in at the drop of a hat simply because of the fact that Minderoo was backing us. That wasn't there before, and that was another reason that I've gone, you know what, this is actually. I'm happy that I'm now out of my comfort zone. That this is just a great opportunity to kick on.
One of the things that's gone through my mind a few times, and I know Kate and I briefly had conversations around this, but the fact that there's not a museum or something that houses the history of this, I think is quite sad. And when you listen to a couple of volunteers and things like that, I hate to think what they actually have as memories from this thing. That there will be things they have that you're not even aware of. But it would be, I would have thought it would be a terrific opportunity to be able to put something together that allows you to charge, to view this history, but also just for the sake of the project and for the sake of the future of this. The past is clearly rich.
Absolutely, and document. There's an opportunity for us not only to document the creation of Leeuwin and the foundation, but to be able to say, look, this is where we've come from. Here's some of the recent tragedy, some of the recent history.
Just the broken pieces from the boat, just things that mark
Yeah.
a period of time.
Yeah.
And this stuff I don't think would cost a lot to
No.
bring it together.
No.
But it's just being conscious to do it.
Yeah, indeed, and
I know when we just did a little visit over the road there, when we first came down here, we kind of walked out of there going, kind of, is that all there is, in a sense? But you could sense there was so much more.
yeah. So here's the interesting thing, and totally agree with you. I alluded to earlier, where we're, I don't know if you had a look at our office space, it's pretty ordinary, but right next door to that is another work bay that goes of the same dimensions, about 600 square metres. And hopefully, touch wood, that'll be our new office location going forward. But it means that we'll have the space to not only be an office and a workshop for the things that we need to do and storage for all of the giant pieces that we need to store for when we've got an operating ship, but also a gathering place for our volunteers and the community, change rooms, a setup where we can put a climbing rig inside so that you can practice climbing masts without being out in the weather, so that young volunteers can have a go without being actually on the ship. So things like that is something that we're actually looking to do, and being able to document our getting back in the water is quite important. And we're working with the guys at Minderoo to be able to say, okay, the public affairs guys, to say, let's make sure that we've got our time-lapse cameras in place and we've got that sort of footage, which is wonderful. So, provided we document these things well, and we, this what you're doing here may well form part of it, because we're getting a slice and a feeling of what do our current range of volunteers and people that are involved, our stakeholders, think about the past and the present and the future. So a lot of the candid comments that we'll capture today, I think are going to be important and may well make it onto a reel in the future. But certainly we've got to acknowledge the past, and we've got to acknowledge the accident. And I think there should be a museum and exhibit that we permanently display. And here are all the busted bits, and this is what we were, and this is what we're coming back to. I was this morning at our laydown area in North Quay, which is where all of the broken bits are, and there's just everywhere. So the insurance guys were there, and the from our side, and also from Maersk's side, to make sure that we weren't pulling a Swifties. But the job today was laying out the sails, and nobody from the insurance company, because the insurance companies deal with bulk carriers and cargo ships and tugboats and pilot boats and stuff like that. Nobody there understands the workings of a working tall ship, and the thought that the mast and the rigging and the sails and the spars and all of these pieces, I'm pretty sure in their minds, yeah, it's a ship, but it might as well be tinsel on a Christmas tree. They might as well be decorations. Today, these guys actually physically understood that this was the main propulsion. This was the engine of our ship. This is what kept us off the rocks off Cape Leeuwin. And if any of this were to fail while we're offshore, life and limb is in danger. And for the first time, I think they actually understood that. And we were and Zoe, who you'll meet next, was there helping us unroll and unfurl some of these sails, which there are literally tons of sailcloth. There's 17 sails, and they all had to be unwrapped and unrolled. And if you unwrapped and unrolled them and put them all out on the ground, there is 1,000 square metres of sailcloth. So 100 metres by 100 metres of sails, and all of which needed to be inspected and looked at. And at that point, you could see comprehension go through these guys, through the loss adjuster, and they go, oh, okay, I'm beginning to get it now. Why were we upset about the sails being destroyed? Because, they're not just handkerchiefs, they're not just decorations, it's not tinsel. And that was a good thing this morning.
So the sails were destroyed?
Yes. So the sails are called, they're bent onto the ship. So they are part of, they're wrapped around the mast and they're wrapped around the boom, and they live aboard the ship. Some of them live downstairs, they're taken away downstairs, that can be unhanked, etc. But for the most part, The majority of sails are on the yards or on the booms. So as the container ship collided with Leeuwin, there was no hull-to-hull contact. It was the overhang of the container ship striking the masts, and it pushed all three masts backwards. So as part of, and there's rigging that's 30 millimetres thick. They're the wires that hold everything up. The masts themselves are, you can't put your arms around them. So as all of this stuff was getting destroyed, the sails are all part of that. And then, the masts and the spars and the sails and the rigs are all part of one sort of thing.
What I saw at lunchtime today, because I kept saying, doesn't seem to be a whole lot of damage when you look at the hull.
And thank God for that, because, had there been hull-on-hull contact, I'm convinced there'd be nothing left and we'd be wrapping up the foundation. Thank God that didn't happen. And it was everything above deck, and you will have seen some of the damage and the squash dories and things like that. But we're really lucky. We're really lucky. We don't know the outcome of the ATSB investigation, but the initial theory was that the container ship actually ran into a mud bank and that pushed her off Leeuwin. And that's meant that only the forecastle of the ship struck the masts. But now it turns out that there was no mud bank there for the ship to strike. That wasn't like a barrier that protected the Leeuwin. They found out that about 2 or 3 minutes before the collision happened, the ship realised it was out of control and they threw both anchors down. And the anchors weren't stopping the ship. There were 4 tugboats trying to fend it off, and they were losing the battle. But at the last minute, just as she was striking Leeuwin, the port anchor actually grabbed, and that's what stopped. This is the theory, all right? I'm not trying to double guess an investigation, but that would explain why the bow came off, and that the stern then kicked back into the museum. And here's this other lovely thing. I love this story because I was asked to speak at Minderoo about the after effects of the collision, what happened, and talk about OH&S and stuff. And I put up a picture of the Leeuwin as she's beautifully under a cloud of sail and just lovely. And then I put up a photograph of Leeuwin immediately after with all of the destroyed masts and shards of timber and the rest of it. Then I put up a picture of the container ship. And there she is, and they went, oh, that's a big ship, but let me tell you how big this ship is, all right? It's 330 metres long, it's 40 metres wide, and it weighs 110,000 tonnes. Does everybody understand those dimensions? And everyone's going, okay, here's another ship that's exactly the same dimensions. I'll put up a picture of the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford. Now do you get it? This ship is the same dimension as that. And I went, oh, okay, we've just been hit by a nuclear aircraft carrier. And that was an interesting sort of realisation that, oh my God, it could have really been a different story.
It's terrific. Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Better take some photos.
Yep.
Do you want the...
We good to go?
Yeah, that's rolling.
All right. Thanks for that. So, Barb, thanks for joining us. This is, I've seen the Scout thing. Barb, tell me about your experience with the Leeuwin. Firstly, how you relate it.
Well, I've had a long-term love of the sea, grew up sailing on the river here. We were involved with the building of the Divekin and documenting that. And I was aware of Leeuwin, but I was heavily involved in Scouts. I brought my kids to join Sea Scouts at the start of the century in 2005. No, it was 1995, sorry. Brought my kids to join Sea Scouts in 1995 when we came back to Perth. And I wanted them to have the sailing adventures on the river that I'd had. And so then I stayed on as a Scout leader myself, and I wanted to extend those adventures further. And in 2011, I got an invitation to go to the World Scout Jamboree in Sweden and to sail there with the European Sea Scout Armada. And that's an informal fleet of tall ships and bigger sailing ships owned by different Sea Scout groups around in Europe. And they get together and they sail to the World Jamboree together. So with a few of my venturers, we flew ahead of the Australian contingent and joined the Armada in Copenhagen and sailed around in the Kattegat and up and down and sailed to Sweden, and it was just a marvellous experience. And we all got to move around and go onto the other boats and share with the other Sea Scouts from all the different countries, and I thought it's just the pinnacle of my scouting experience. And I so wanted that for more of my youth back here. So when we came back to Australia, I started trying to build relationships between Sea Scout groups in the Asia Pacific region, and we've got a little organisation going. But obviously, Western Australia is different to Denmark, where there's a little port every hour of sailing you can get to. So here, it has to be a big sail to go anywhere. And it's impossible for us to have our own tall ship, unlike they do in Europe. Just the population size and things doesn't support that for Scouts in Australia. So I really wanted to find a way for Scouts WA and Scouts Australia to work in with Leeuwin, because I knew the program and I knew that we were very much aligned in the way we see our purpose being the development of leadership capacity in young people through adventurous activities. So it took me, I started to develop that relationship when I was Chief Commissioner, but I could not get that progressed while I was having to do all the other things with Chief Commissioner. So when I finished my term as Chief Commissioner, I came to Leeuwin and started saying, when can we set up a voyage? When can we set up a voyage? And so it wasn't till COVID hit and we all got set back a bit in the plans, but it wasn't till April 2023 we were able to set up a voyage where all of the youth members, all the trainees on board were youth members of Scouts WA or leaders of Scouts WA. And it turns out a lot of the crew were actually past members of Scouts as well. It seems to be a continuing theme. And we had such a good voyage. And so I've been a Leeuwin tragic ever since, continued on developing my skills and taking opportunities to train with Leeuwin. And so I've been involved in things outside of scouting with Leeuwin myself. I've got that relationship now there as well as a Leeuwin volunteer. And it's just carried on from there.
Fantastic. So your relationship with Leeuwin today, are you actively involved with Leeuwin in other capacities?
Yep.
Tell me about those.
Well, I made sure, because anyone that goes on the voyage and is interested in continuing with the ship can remain in contact with them as part of the volunteer group of people that they will call on for assistance. So I started volunteering for things when they needed help. And because we were working together on developing our next voyage for Scouts, which was supposed to have been to Busselton this January, but that got shifted around and things happened. Oh no, sorry, we didn't go. We're not going to Busselton this January with Leeuwin because Leeuwin can't go to Busselton sailing this January, so it's rather unfortunate. But in any case, I started volunteering for times when they needed someone to come down and help with ship work that needed to be done. And then I got invited to, there was an offer to join a voyage mid-year that was all volunteers. And it was meant to re-bring all the volunteers back in to sail together after we came out of administration. And one of the things that Captain James liked about that voyage was all of the people on the vessel were already people who had experience. So we were taking our training to a higher level. And he said, let's see what this ship can actually do once we've got a fully trained crew on board. So we did tacking and backwards and forwards and all sorts of activities. We had a tremendous time. It was a brilliant voyage. And I was able to do a bunch of things that I can't do when I'm in charge of youth on a scout voyage. So I was able to actually do the more adventurous things for myself and discovered that I did have a reasonable head for heights, and I can climb higher and I can do the rigging work. So that was super. That was just tremendous for me to discover that. I love taking photos. I took lots of photos on that voyage. I've got an enormous collection that I've got to work my way through. I'm not sure where I was going with that one then.
It's good. I was talking before about
Oh yes, so
the experiences
yeah.
that some of the people would have collected memories and things like that. And we were talking about,
Yes.
was there somewhere in houses? Was there a museum? Was there an online collection? Because the memories that clearly everybody has are marginally different, I imagine. But,
Yep.
but from all things, everybody just had these great experiences. What was the favourite thing on the boat? What was your favourite thing to do?
My favourite thing to do, there's a couple of top ones, and climbing up the rigging and climbing up onto the yards, out onto the yards and setting sails and things, that's just tremendous. There's a particular spot on the ship that I really like, and that's to go right out the front on the bowsprit when we're sailing, and you're rigged and you're clipped on, so you're quite safe. But when you're out there, the whole ship is moving with the ocean and the sails down from you, and you can see everybody there, and it's just a wonderful experience. I really liked that.
Sounds like the Titanic.
Oh, it's just awesome. It's awesome. Never mind looking out from the Titanic, looking back on the ship, that's just amazing. But there was one thing on that voyage that I was really moved by, and the last night of a voyage, it's a tradition on a lot of vessels, and it's certainly a tradition on Leeuwin, to have a thing called Sod's Opera. And it's a bit of a skit night. And different watchers put together a skit, and the crew members put together a skit, and captain puts in an appearance and says a poem or tells a story, and it's tremendous fun. That the crew members, one of the young women in particular, very good guitarist, beautiful voice, and she and her friends were on board the boat, were practicing these songs. When the whole crew, the 55 odd people we had on board, when we were all together in the saloon with the lights low and playing guitars and having fun, it was almost spooky how wonderful it felt. You know, very intimate, bonding, fun environment. Just crazy stuff. Really nice.
Everybody speaks of that bonding
Yeah.
thing, and I've been involved in enough sessions like that at different stages, but not to the level of passion that people have talked about today. I mean, it's been quite extraordinary.
And it's very much in common with the kind of bonding we get on a longer scout event, like when you take your trip to Jamboree. There's a melding together that happens within the troop when they're away from home for more than 3 or 4 days, your standard sort of short camps. When you have a longer camp, the bonding starts to work and the magic starts to happen. And that weird kid is not that weird kid anymore. He's just your little brother that's part of the group, and we're all just part of the family. And it's that I see that same cohesion and magic happening in Leeuwin, and so that sells me a ticket to wanting to be permanently involved. When you see that kind of, that's what I love about scouting, and that's what I love when I see it in Leeuwin as well.
The thing that's been obvious today is there's 2 real components. There's one thing is the ship itself.
Yep.
The other thing is the people experience that it generates, and so it's really facilitated to that set of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to take the ship home, but you do get to take the experiences.
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean, Zoe here before was saying that her mother got her to go on the voyage because she'd been on the voyage. how would you say to people in your scout troop or in your friends of friends or whatever, how would you say to them, why should they do it?
It's an extraordinary opportunity, firstly, to learn about how a tall ship works, because we have very few opportunities for that sort of thing here in Perth, but to also learn a lot more about yourself on that journey. It's just a magical environment and lots of fun, very hard work, and not a lot of creature comforts, but it's very exciting.
So it's putting me off getting on board.
Oh, and I've got one other form of volunteering that I've carried on doing since then. Since our poor ship was demasted, I've been involved with, firstly, part of the de-rigging and de-assembling of all the equipment there. And I found that a lot of my scout learned roping and knotting and chandlery type skills that I've got through sea scouting, they're very applicable to what we're doing with Leeuwin, except I've never worked with rope quite that size. But one of the other opportunities I've been able to do is we've needed volunteer watch officers, duty officers to maintain the watch at night, because we don't have so many employed crew at the moment while she's not doing other things.
So what are the duties of the watch officer?
You do the 4-hour anchor watch sequence that Zoe was talking about earlier, and that's checking all the bilges, checking all the lines. You normally would check the freezer temperatures. Just there's a series of things that you do all over the boat every 4 hours through the night.
Did you go around and get a tattoo afterwards?
Yeah, I might.
Zoe was
I might. I've been thinking about getting my first tattoo.
Zoe was saying how a lot of people mark the occasion.
Yeah, yep. So roughly once a week now I do a night watch, and I get to sit on deck and watch the harbour and take photos, which I love doing, go and check the boat. I've got the entire boat to myself. I go and check and maintain and look.
So it's a sole job.
Sole job. And I love it, And when you're going aloft, you always have to be rigged up. There's a task involved in night watch, which is bringing in the ensign at sunset. That's the red,
yes.
Right? And then putting it out again in the morning at sunrise. Well, that's up over the back of the away boat, and you have to get rigged up and climb up there to do that. And I'm really pleased that I know where to discover that I know where to find the rigging, I know how to put it all on, and I'm at my advanced age. Bad knees and never mind that. I'm trusted to be able to rig myself up, put the sail up, put the flag up, bring it back in the morning, unrig myself, climb back down, and then unrig myself. But it's a skill and a micro adventure that I do twice a night that I would not have been doing if I stayed at home and didn't volunteer. I love getting new opportunities to develop more skills and have adventures whenever I can. So that's good fun. It's really good fun.
So, what do you want people to know about the Leeuwin? People who don't know the Leeuwin.
That it's got a tremendous history in this state of developing leadership in young people and a love for the sea in young people, and that it has no parallel in our state. There is no other vessel or program quite like Leeuwin, and it really is something that we would be very much diminished by not having in the future. It's the idea of it continuing and continuing to train young people and old people. It's just a brilliant concept, and it's one that should be maintained.
What do you see about the development into the future? So the opportunity now to in a sense, start again. There's
Yeah.
a whole sense of starting again here, rebirth, whatever you want to call it. What would you hope might come out of that thing? Is there something that could be improved from the experiences you had? Is there something that the boat could have or the ship could have that's different?
I've been thinking about that, and I haven't had a really strong vision for what else could be done. But there is an opportunity, anytime you're out in the ocean with young people, there's an opportunity to make observations, scientific observations that contribute to our knowledge about what's going on in the ocean. I don't know, I love the program so much. I haven't had a strong vision for anything else that would be different. But I think things like teaching them more about the maritime environment and the animals we're going past and the birds and things, there's a great opportunity with that. Like we've saw whales several times on our volunteer voyage, and I photographed a lot of them, which is not easy to do because, oh, it's over there, no, it's over there, camera. But I didn't know, no one named what kind of whale they were. So it wasn't until I got back that I started asking, oh, what kind of whale was I actually looking at then? And maybe we could talk more about migratory patterns and responsibility towards the ocean. So I think that would be a useful thing. And I think there's a lot of young people and adults who would find that to be a very meaningful thing to be exploring at the same time.
That's interesting, but I'm sure everybody's got their hands full with
Oh yeah,
what's on now.
yeah.
But that's really an interesting extension to what could be activities for Leeuwin, the purpose for being there.
And it can be, it could be a value add for all ages of the program, because there are times, and we were setting up to do this before, was to do alongside camps, which is where the boat never leaves the wharf, and younger people, joeys and cub groups could come and do activities on the boat and learn more about the ship and do things on the ship, or we could be teaching environmental stuff as part of that.
Awesome was talking about facilities that weren't on the ship, that learning to climb ropes and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
All that stuff scares the heck out of me.
It's not so bad once you have a go, you just sort of baby steps, and you think, well, and so before they even let you climb up the shrouds, you have to hang for, I think it's a 15-second hang. If you can hold your own weight 15 seconds, say, okay, you can do the first level climb. If you've done the first level climb and you've climbed around the mast and you've gone down the other side, you're allowed to go to the second level climb, and so on. And it's a great thing to discover that you can actually still do it when you think you're just an old scout lady.
And this is a bit related to the other thing. What do you think Leeuwin's mission should be into the future?
I'm not sure that I could improve on the original mission, which is, to develop leadership in young people through learning about tall ship sailing, that kind of adventure. I think that's a fine concept, and I think it is still valid and relevant these days. In fact, if anything, I see young people being even more keen to take on outdoor adventures than they were for a while. There was a dip towards the end of the 1990s where kids were more involved in indoor and online things. There's been a resurgence of interest in outdoor adventures because it's something very different from anything else they'll ever get to do any other way.
I know at the Jamboree that concern was still there.
Yeah.
Some of those that I spoke with.
Yeah.
We've been very good at talking, so it takes away all my questions.
Ah, well, we do a bit of that.
The foundation itself, is there any thoughts about what that should, whether there should be any changes, any advancement, any thoughts that should be shared back there?
I haven't been really involved in any way in the structure of the foundation because I know and work with the people who are running the ship, but not the foundation itself. I remember when we had when we went into administration, there was a very strong feeling that there ought to be more representation on the board from people who actually sail the ship, who actually know what it's about and why we do what we do. I think the general feeling was that the people making the decisions didn't actually have skin in the game. Sorry?
Didn't really have an affinity with the ship itself.
Yeah, didn't really understand why things were running the way they were running. And, you know, the idea of the corporate adventures and that sort of thing, it may help to pay for the ship, but it's not part of the core mission.
Is there anything else you want to tell me about Leeuwin?
Yeah, there is one thing. One thing I've noticed in my voyages, there is a really high percentage of young women signing on as crew. And compared to what I see in Scouts. In Scouts I see, in the younger groups, I see about 30% girls to boys in Joeys and Cubs, and sometimes also the Scout section. In my Scout troop I had 50% girls and boys. In the older sections, the girls tend to predominate. They start getting their teeth into leadership and adventures and things, and I see that reflected in what Leeuwin's doing. So there's many more young women involved in Leeuwin than you would think from the general public idea of who would be interested in sailing and being involved in the ship.
Better get out there and tell the young boys that's the case, I think.
Yeah, that would certainly,
Might
yeah,
encourage more participation.
because young women they're strong and they're enthusiastic and they're courageous and they're good leaders. And so I don't think Zoe mentioned it, but on our volunteer voyage, the person we elected when it was the ship takeover, the person we elected to be captain was Zoe, and she was terrific. She did a great job. Yep. Captain's shirt was a bit big on her, but she did a great job, and that was a very popular choice.
She wants a job running my office.
I'm sure she could do it,
Hey, I think we
but you can't have her, Ken. Yeah, she's ours.
Oh, hang on, there's a lot of possession going on here. Hey, I think we're good. That's been terrific.
Cool,
It's been terrific.
cool.
We're not let off quite that easily because we're
No, it's one photo.
Okay.
But